So Hugh, thank you very much for your time. Hugh, you've done a lot of interviews. You've spoken to so many people. But you've always seemed to have stories to tell and such a great memory. How do you do it?
Well, I do a lot of preparation. Over the years, I've done a lot of preparation, particularly for rugby matches and that type of thing. And so, when I think of how many names I've written down over the years, it must be thousands.
Yes. No, for sure.
But otherwise, if I'm making reference to things and that type of stuff, I have, rugby annuals going back over many years, the South African Rugby Annual, and other, websites. I might look up the GN's website for all the Springbok information and that type of thing. But I can assure you I don't carry it all in my
head. But Hugh, just in your words, what is so special about rugby? Why or how does it bring the best out of those who play it, in your opinion?
I think one of the great attractions of rugby is that there is a position for all types of people. And, obviously they're talking about the long, the short, the tall, the broad, the quick, the whatever, and as I always recall at school, we had 2 cricket teams in our age group, but 6 rugby teams.
Oh, wow.
Because, quite frankly, if you can't play cricket, it's a pretty boring game to play. If you're going to field all day and bat number 10, it's not a hell of a lot of fun.
Yes.
Whereas, a little fellow who might not have a lot of ball sense but has got strength, you can play in the front row position, can run around and enjoy the camaraderie and the team spirit and have a nice little run, and it's going to take him an hour. Whereas, again, when I left school, I was more into cricket than I was into rugby. But the attraction to me of rugby is that it does have all those different, you've got 15 players, and, obviously your 2 locks will be similar, and your front rankers, maybe apart from your hooker, will be pretty similar. But they won't be the quickest guys on the field.
Definitely.
And so, even if you look at the front rankers over the years, at the international, provincial level, they've all got ball sense, but they're not quick enough to be top soccer players, that type of thing. So that to me has been the attraction. It's one of the reasons why I'm actually not crazy about the Man of the Match award, because every player has such a different role to play.
Sure.
So if a fly half gets the Man of the Match, what about the poor hooker who might have hooked 20 balls for him?
Yeah.
Or thrown the ball in brilliantly at the line out of the lock, who's provided the scrum half with all the ball.
Yeah.
So, that to me has been the great attraction of the game.
No, that's.
I was asked to give a talk at Rondebosch during one of the school Easter weekends about a year or 2 ago. And they had a fellow who was, to put it mildly, rotund. But he was actually a blooming useful front ranker. And when I came to hand out the jerseys, and he came up and I had spoken to him about the attraction of rugby and position for everybody, when he came up, I said, there you go. You see, I told you guys there's a position for everybody.
Oh, Hugh, that's excellent. But talking about school and rugby, and it seems that now, it's getting televised, like there's dedicated channels for schoolboy rugby. Do you feel that's the right emphasis placed on it?
Yeah, I think that as long as one doesn't make superheroes out of schoolboy rugby players, I believe.
Yes.
You know, there's so much emphasis on schools and winning and that type of thing. We had an address at the Joburg Sportsman's Club by the former headmaster at one of the top schools in South Africa. And he said, you know, people are more interested in the results of the first 15 than the matric results.
Yeah.
And, you know, a school is sort of judged on its first 15 results, and if they're top of the log in the first 15, then the school's a great school.
Yeah.
So and whilst we have electronic media and the facility there too, I think it's a great thing as long as everybody keeps their feet on the ground and don't get grandiose ideas about the fact that they may be a really good player at school, because you know, whilst I value that, to me, not enough players come through into more senior ranks, and even talking about club rugby.
Yes.
You know, so you can be a really talented schoolboy player and get your colours and that type of thing. But to me personally, you haven't really achieved a huge amount until you prove yourself in the open world.
Another great perspective. Thank you, Hugh. Yeah, it's interesting to see where it's going. So I'm watching it quite carefully, but yeah, we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but Hugh, let's talk a bit about your rugby playing career and Ellis Park. That's where it all started for you. Just how special is that ground for you?
Yeah, it was a very special ground for me. The first game I ever watched at Ellis Park was when I was 9 years old. And I didn't watch another game at Ellis Park till I was about 15.
Oh, wow.
But I remember that being a 9-year-old, and, you know, we sat, my brother and I and a great friend of ours sat on the popular side, and it was when Nachi throwing was at the height of its popularity. And people were hurling Nachis onto the field. And,
oh, wow.
And it was, but I had a great day, you know, and funnily enough, it was very strange because I said to my mother, aged 9, I said, I want to play on that field one day.
There we go.
Which I did, in fact, when I was playing for my school first 15. We played a curtain raiser to the British Lions Transvaal game. And, you know, thereafter, I mean, I represented Transvaal under 20 for 2 years, and but it was the old Ellis Park. You know, there were bench seats on the popular side, and Splinter giving wooden stands on the main grandstand side. But it was a great. For me. It was a super field to play on. Yeah,
definitely. There's something special about that place, indeed. And like you mentioned, you played for Transvaal, but was that, you know, time that you played for Transvaal, was that the energy that sort of kept you in the game for rugby all your life? The fact that you got to play provincial rugby, that just sort of kept you going through all these years, so to say?
No, not at all. You know, when I left school, soon after I left school, I played cricket for Old Edwardians from the age of about 14 or 15. In the Thirsty Thirds on the Sunday, they used to pick a few so-called promising schoolboy cricketers to play in the Sunday third side, and I started playing for them at a very young age. And then I got into just after I matriculated, I got picked in the old Ed's first team, so I was playing first league cricket.
Sure. And
an old school friend of mine who was a very good rugby player phoned me up and said there are a group. In fact, he was doing his matric again at Damlin, or some subjects again at Damlin. He said there are a group of us who are going out to join Wanderers. Why don't you come and play? And I said, well, I'm playing cricket at the moment, but I'll think about it when cricket season ends.
Yeah.
Which I did, and then I joined the Wanderers as an 18-year-old, and you know, in those days you had to join a club to get recognition. And in fact, I didn't join the club to get recognition. I joined the club to play rugby and be with my mates. And then the next thing is that club secretary said, you've been chosen for the Transvaal under-20 trials. And I went to the Transvaal under-20 trials, and a little bit surprised I was chosen for the Transvaal under-20 side. And so it continued almost from there on in. And the following year, in fact, I captained the Transvaal under-20 side, and we were unbeaten.
Sure.
And I played in the Wanderers' first side for about the last 6 games of that season. And then obviously started having more success at rugby because I got picked for Transvaal the following season when I was 20 years old. And so in a way, cricket took a little bit of a back seat. I mean, I continued to play first league cricket, but rugby became the game that I had achieved more success at.
Yeah.
And so, really rugby became my first love.
No, definitely. And you did so well, Hugh, because we're going to talk about a few other things, making the Junior Springboks. But playing at number 10, one would say that you had an educated boot. Was that something that you also focused on during your playing years?
Not particularly. We would when we were at school, we had very good coaches.
Yes.
And we had, in fact, when I got to the first team at school, our coach was a fellow by the name of John Hurry, who was a very good all-round sportsman. He played first team rugby at school, but he won the South African mixed doubles tennis championship. He played first league hockey for Old Edwardians. He played first league squash for Old Edwardians. And he was the guy who actually taught me to kick.
Yeah.
And, in those days, when we kicked for touch, we actually kicked torpedoes.
Interesting.
And, the kicking techniques have changed. But sometimes when I see a guy take a kick, a penalty kick for touch on his own 22-meter line and kick it out on the halfway line, I think if the guys still kick torpedoes, they'd kick it out on the opposition's 22-meter line. A la Nas Burta.
Ah, that's something to look at and consider and talk about. That's an interesting topic right there. Sure.
So, and I've discussed it with Nas as well, and he says, to his mind, that when the guys kick for touch from a penalty, particularly inside their own half, because they're looking for that accuracy. I mean, you can still kick a torpedo with accuracy.
Yes.
And again, to me, and I think this is a personal point of view, one hell of a lot more ground.
Yeah. Well, I think we should maybe do an experiment one day. Are you up for that, Hugh? We can see if it's worth looking.
Well, I would like to get a current player to kick torpedoes. These legs are not built for kicking anymore.
That's okay, yeah. No problem. But you obviously, you got picked for the Junior Springboks, and there was a bit of a time there where I think you thought that people were actually joking with you and messing around because you thought, no, it can't be. But you were picked for the Junior Springboks. But I just want to touch on something where you consider your worst sporting memory the 11-6 loss versus Argentina. Why would you consider that your worst sporting memory?
Well, at the time it was probably the highest honor that I had achieved.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, the Pumas, as they were called, had not had a particularly successful tour of South Africa, and had been beaten by some of the lower sort of provinces. And on that particular day, admittedly, we missed about 7 kicks at goal.
Oh.
I'm not going to no names, no tactile, but I wasn't the kicker.
Clear that up.
And in fact, I sort of, in thinking about it afterwards, it was almost a case of us sort of saying, well, we just have to pitch up to win this game, and Bob's your uncle.
Right.
And they played incredibly well, and I was a little bit taken aback, being a bit of a greenhorn at international level and that type of thing, because I was just 20 years old. the celebration that the Pumas players had at the end of the game took my breath away.
Okay.
And, I sort of realized how important it was to them. And in fact, it was not a good day for South African rugby because the Springboks were touring New Zealand and we lost that test in the morning and then lost to the Pumas in the afternoon. So it was a bit of a black day for South African rugby.
Oh, that's rough. Yeah, that's very rough.
Yeah.
But your name speaks for itself. You've commentated for 45 years now. How have you been able to say so dedicated to that profession?
Well, I stopped playing rugby at the age of 26, primarily because my brother and I and my father-in-law basically was the chairman of the company. We had started our own company to make it easier, like in jewelry manufacture. And it got to the point where we had to work for a living. And I was in a situation where, quite often I'd say, well, I can't do this because I've got to go to rugby practice, or I can't do this, or I won't be available for a meeting on Friday because we're traveling to Cape Town. And so at the age of 26, I actually retired from all rugby.
Sure.
And in fact, for about 4 years, I dipped out of rugby completely.
Wow. And
just dedicated myself to the business. And then it was basically Mickey Gerber who got me back into rugby. He really press ganged me into, the press gang means gentle coercion, which it wasn't too gentle. He said, you owe it to the game.
Well,
you better come and help.
And it's been I think one of the best decisions you've ever made, Hugh. Really, really good.
Well, the other thing was that I really had never considered commentary until pretty recently. Commentary never paid one enough to live on.
Okay. And
in the early days, Chick Henderson, who was one of my very early mentors and a great friend, and I used to actually joke about it and say, it's actually costing us rugby to commentate rugby because we would get a call on a Thursday and they'd say, please go to Witbank, Naui Malaklani, and commentate on a Friday night, Southeastern Transvaal playing against the Falcons. Lovely game at 7:30 on a Friday night in Witbank. And we would travel there and back and maybe have a beer after the game and get it would cost us more in petrol than they paid us.
Oh dear.
So it was really a case of it being a bit of a hobby. But I mean, when Kim Shippey, who was the man who phoned me and said, would you like to try commentating? When he said to me, have you thought about commentating? I quite honestly said to him, no, frankly, I've never even given it a thought. And he said, well, I'm looking for an English-speaking person who's played provincial rugby. Funnily enough, I had done a few speeches and emceed the Wanderers annual rugby dinner and had been on a radio program that Kim Shippey was called the Castle Largo Sports Quiz. And he said to me, you seem to be reasonably comfortable behind the microphone. Do you want to come and try? I said, sure. Rather, sort of, yes, not, oh, wow, yeah, thank you. And he said, good, on Saturday, Transvaal are playing the All Blacks. This was in 1976. And you are in.
Sure.
And so I pitched at the commentary box, and Kim Shippey said to me, put the earphones on and hold this lip mic up to your lips and speak when I don't.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to commentary.
So thrown in the deep end there properly, Hugh.
Yeah, when I see the guys I did comments for 4 years. I was supposed to be the so-called expert opinion.
Sure.
And I did comments for 4 years before I called a game.
Wow.
And so, what's happening these days is that the scenario has changed. They have Super Sport, I think, now they seek talent, and people go in for interviews and do a bit of a talent the contest, basically. And then the next thing is commentating.
Sure. Yeah, interesting times, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it has changed.
Yeah, but the face of everything has changed. I mean, I don't say that in a critical way.
No.
Just the way it happened in my day and the way it's happening these days.
Yeah. But I think there'll only be one golden voice of Hugh Bladen, so well done, Hugh.
Thank you.
But, I think it's fair to say that you kept it simple, but effective. Is that how you describe, what you saw in a match? You describe what you saw, but it was very effective, but simple. Yeah, when I got a lot of advice from the likes of Kim Shippey. Kim Shippey and Trevor Quirk were full-time with the SABC, so they were the main commentating guys, and in fact, Chick Henderson at that stage was doing more radio than television, and then he came over to television. He and Kim Shippey were big buddies. In fact, Chick was the guy, I think, who actually said to Kim, phone Hugh Bladen, because, I know he loves the game, and he could, my mother always said, the one thing you must do is speak properly. So I always thanked her for that. That's excellent.
Got teased a bit when I went to boarding school in my first year, but appreciated it afterwards.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. But you've seen many highs in South African rugby, and would you regard the 95 World Cup win as sort of like a watershed moment for rugby in South Africa?
I think in context of where we had been in terms of isolation, and the fact that we got back into World Rugby in 1992. In fact, we got back into World Rugby in 1992 when it was announced that the government were going to release Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Because I think he only got released in 1993 or 1994. And the fact that we had been isolated was the real factor in terms of 95 being our first World Cup.
Yeah.
Having missed out in 87 onwards and the 87 and 91 competitions. And so then to go into our first World Cup and win it was a great moment for South African sport and obviously for South African rugby. And I think the way that it did, the whole movie about Nelson Mandela and his attitude to the Springbok jersey, and the way he embraced the World Cup by wearing the number 6 jersey, onto the platform and in greeting the players before the game, just swelled the whole country's spirit and the attitude towards what we were going into a multiracial society.
Yeah, no, significant, absolutely significant. You're quite correct there. But I want to ask you, how do you balance it when you obviously commentating, for example, South Africa playing, and you obviously want South Africa to win, but things aren't going the way they should be. How do you sort of manage that? How do you commentate fairly when your heart, you want South Africa to win, but you've got to call it as it is? How do you manage it? How do you balance that?
Well, I always just said, you call the game as you see it.
Yeah.
And you call the game, one team will be, let's say one team will be dominant. So you will be calling that team more than you will the defending team or the team that isn't getting as much ball. And in fact, I've been stopped in the street and people say, why are you biased against the Lions? For heaven's sake, I spent half my life at Ellis Park. And, you sort of say, well, what are you talking about? And they say, well, that game 2 weeks ago when the Bulls beat the Lions by 32 points to 6, you were biased against the Lions. And I said, well, one team was playing and the other team was defending.
True.
So that situation, there were sometimes when we got information from the powers that be at SuperSport who would say, you are, particularly when we were overseas, they would say, you are commentating this game only to South Africa. So you can give it a bit of a South African bias.
Right.
But, a lot of the time one would be commentating internationally. And so I like to think that I would call the game as it happened on the field.
Yeah, which is the right thing to do, Hugh. So yeah, good on you. Very, very good. Hugh, and I have to bring this up if you don't mind, because he was absolute legend for South African rugby, but US van der Westhuizen, your most impressive player you have watched?
No. When I say no, I'm going back to the question of positions and players in positions.
Yes.
And so funnily enough, Nick Mallett was asked to name his Springbok side, and he named Reid Appiah as his scrum half.
Okay.
He said because he kicked better than US did.
Right.
And his tactical kicking was absolutely, as they used to say, opatiki. And, if people say to me, one of the best rugby players I ever saw was Uli Schmidt.
Oh.
He was an out and out all rounder, despite the fact that he played in the middle of the scrum. And so if one said to me, who would your best lucid prop be that you've seen, I would say probably Os Durant, and I would go through a team where there would be players who would be of equal standard, or players who played in a different era, or players who maybe didn't play in a stronger side, and that type of thing. But
yeah.
I would, one of the great players I saw in my life, in fact, one of the greatest was Dani Gerber.
Yeah, he was going to be my next guy. I was going to ask you, surely that guy was just, phenomenal. Best outside centre South Africa's probably produced?
Well, yeah, I would say that he ranks amongst the world's best centres ever that I saw play. But again, the game has changed. Defensive patterns have changed. I always say when I played, the forwards fought for the ball, gave it to the three quarters. When the three quarters messed it up, the forwards fought for the ball again. Now, you can go. The other day, in fact, I was watching some game, and after about 20 minutes, I realized that the fly half had only touched the ball twice in the game.
Wow.
And so, you've now got forwards lining up and taking ball after ball after ball, and rucks. I mean, I as a fly half never tackled a front ranker unless he happened to burst away from a lineup by pure fluke, and then normally would run over me.
Yeah, that's true.
So defensively, you as a fly half in my day, you would go up on defense. If your opposite number passed the ball, you would then cover like crazy. But now, you can have a fly with shift tackle situations and that type of thing. You can have a fly half who's tackling 100-kilogram centre. Mind you, most of the fly halves these days are 100 k's anyway.
Anyway, yeah. So it's almost evened out, so to say.
So the game has changed. It's changed enormously in defensive play. I don't think the outside backs have as much room to run as they do. I think the New Zealanders create more open spaces for themselves by the movement that they do and the backing up that is absolutely brilliant. But on the whole, the backs don't have as much time and space as I think they did in Dani's day. But given that, he was a tremendous player.
Yeah, he was absolutely. those lines that he ran and the pace and just the power that he had was, it was awesome to see. Really, really awesome.
Well, one of his great attributes was that he ran off the ball brilliantly.
Yeah.
So he would sum up in a trice where he was going to run off the ball, and so often, he would run himself into an open space. And thereafter run circles around would-be tacklers.
Yeah, and more than one occasion.
Yeah.
But chat about running well, and Brown Banner also must have been a player that you enjoyed talking about. 2007 World Cup, he was just phenomenal. He must also have been one of the players that you can mark down as one of the legends of South African rugby.
Yeah, he obviously he holds the South African try-scoring record, and he was a master of the interception, as was Jean de Villiers. And I suppose in a way I had a soft spot for Brian Habana because we went to the same school.
Yeah.
And but you can't have a soft spot for a guy if he's not playing well, or he's not making the team. And if the guy's running, and scoring tries from 50, 60 meters out, you're going to get excited about it. Well, I'd get excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, he's been so good to watch, and let's hope that trend continues with South African rugby, that we're always a major force in the world. Because we were chatting about New Zealand earlier, etc., and it's so good that rivalry exists with another nation, and hopefully we maintain that standard and get better through the years. That's important, I feel. But yeah, anyway.
Well, the great thing is if we get back to a normal world, it will be fantastic.
Yeah.
One of the South Africa's problems is our exchange rate, and which I think is a huge factor in the number of players that have gone to play overseas. And I was flabbergasted a little while ago to hear from one of the board members of SA Rugby that there are 500 South Africans playing rugby overseas.
Yeah.
So that's why one hell of a lot of teams, Ryan, it's one hell of a lot of teams that and players who could be playing rugby in South Africa but don't because they're able to earn euros or pounds or yen, and one doesn't blame them for searching for the money.
Yeah, it is quite sad because you feel that the guys are giving their all here in South Africa in the domestic competitions, but that these players overseas that are there because of how good they are. So it's such a tough one because these guys they're aspiring to be the best, but it's not going to happen anytime soon because of that lure with the finances, and those guys are going over.
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, your most of the World Cup squad are great many of the World Cup squad are playing overseas.
Yeah. And
so an up-and-coming player who is playing, let's say, in the current provincial situation, it's also a difficult job for Jacques Minauber to judge who, is that guy up to international standard?
Yeah.
And how do we assess whether he's up to international standard or not, if our provincial rugby is watered down. I'm sure Jacques Minauber will get a lot of help from the director of rugby, Rassie Erasmus, because they've worked together closely for some years now. But it is a very difficult situation for the current South African coach to assess how good our local players are.
No, I agree with you, and it's as much as, with all due respect, and when I talk about the Currie Cup, as much as that competition is a fantastic competition, it's the oldest one in the world, it's not carrying the same weight that it used to because of the players being overseas, and that was such I would say, a competition to judge the skills of the players and where they're going, because that was, that competition was played with, intensity, and those guys wanted to win it. It was jolly good, but it just sort of feels that same sort of threshold isn't there, if that makes any sense what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, it's just the knock-on effect from professionalism, and it's one of the things that the powers that be at South African rugby have to live with, and we as ardent South African supporters have to go with. So we are the World Cup champions.
True.
Okay, and so the expectation from the South African supporters is extremely high.
It is very high.
Whether what will be, so we haven't played a test since basically we became the World Cup champions nearly 2 years ago, would you believe?
Yeah.
And so, again, then times change quite rapidly. So, what is a Springbok side that maybe is picked in a month's time? We don't really know how they're going to play.
True. But based on that, saying that, then it's actually, in order for us to win the World Cup, it's probably best that our best players are playing overseas then, if we want to be playing against the best players to see how we're doing.
Yeah, if they are, again, how one's got to look at it and say, well, how strong is the English Premiership?
Yeah, true.
In comparison, I mean, frankly, I watch some of that English Premiership rugby and it's pretty boring. And so you're saying, well, and the conditions are so different. They're playing in mud and rain and snow and sometimes pretty rotten conditions. And so it is, it's quite difficult. The other thing is the standard of the Springboks going into those situations lowering. If a player goes and plays in Japan, is his standard going to lower because he's dropping his standard to the Japanese standard? Or, is he able to lift his game into test match international level? It's quite one of the remarkable things about international rugby is, and I can only compare this to having played against the All Blacks in 1970 for Transvaal, and it must have been about my 13th or 14th provincial rugby match, maybe 15th. And after 2 or 3 minutes, I suddenly thought, this is 2 or 3 meters quicker than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And if you don't lift your game, you're really going to see your backside.
Sure.
And that is it happens at all international sport. It's with cricket and with any, as you go up the levels, so you've got to move up a level to play international sport.
Yeah.
And you've got to be the big thing for the selectors and coaches now is to be able to judge whether players have the ability, the physical ability, or the mental ability to make that step up into international rugby.
No, you're right, but like you said, it's been 2 years since we've last had an international fixture, but hopefully we can get that British and Irish Lions tour underway, and that'll be exciting to see how we're doing. That'll be good. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm looking. If that British and Irish Lions tour doesn't take place, it will be a great disappointment.
Yes.
But it's sadly one can say that's not a knock-on effect right through many people's lives is this dreadful pandemic.
Yeah, no, you're right, Hugh. You're 100% correct. But Hugh, as we sort of draw to an end, you've been there for many games, many changes in the world. 27 Currie Cup finals, absolute legend. You're obviously going to commentate on games for as long as you can.
No, I've been retired.
Oh, you've been retired, Hugh. Okay.
Yeah.
That's quite sad.
Which took a little while for me to come to terms with, but
yes.
I sort of understand it and have spoken to members of the family. My children are my greatest critics, particularly my son. And I'm not getting any younger, and maybe it is a good time to just say, okay, that's it, and not be in a situation where people say, oh, geez, I wish this old guy would give the game up.
Wait, so you've been absolutely brilliant to listen to, and thanks for all your effort and hard work. It's a lot of dedication.
Yeah, it has been, but it's a dedication of love, and so
there we go.
It's far easier to do preparation for something that you love and follow something that you love, which is the easiest thing to do in the world. So I've been over the years. Basically, we always travelled well and travelled business class, and we stayed in the same hotel as the Springboks on many occasions, and to have toured the rugby playing world basically in some luxury has been a wonderful opportunity and an incredible privilege.
Well, Hugh, I think we've been privileged to have you commentate on our games here in South Africa, because not many people can do what you've done. There's very few, very, very few people who've been able to describe a game the way you do and just bring it to life. So thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for being able to chat and just for being such a great person. And it's been lovely to have your time here on the show. So thank you, Hugh, and
thanks, Ryan. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
A guy the other day approached me and he said, "Do you mind? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Do you mind if I could take a photograph with you?"
Sure.
And I said, "Listen, pal, you don't have to be sorry, because when people stop asking, then I'll really panic."
Oh, there we go. Oh, Hugh, great, man. Thank you so much for your time. And like I said, it's been great to hear your commentary. It's going to be missed. It's going to be really, really missed. So thank you for all that you've done.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.